I'm Roger Downs. I'm the Conservation Director for the Sierra Club, and I welcome you all today to Albany. Today I stand with all of you and my colleagues in calling upon Governor Andrew Cuomo and the Department of Environmental Conservation to deny the 401 water quality certification permits for the proposed Constitution pipeline. The Constitution pipeline is a joint venture between Williams and Caviton Oil Companies. As proposed, this 30-inch frac gas conveyance would run 124 miles from Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania to Schoharie, New York, carving a 125-foot scar through the heart of New York's Susquehanna River Basin from the southern tier along the western slopes of the Catskills. If this pipeline is built, it will destroy over 1,800 acres of forest land and great farmland, cutting over 700,000 trees, clear-cutting it across that expanse, across 277 waterways in upstate New York, representing almost 3,000 linear feet of stream disturbance. It will put our communities and public safety at risk, and it will allow pipeline corporations to seize land from New York residents through eminent domain. The pipeline has already received its approvals from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that we believe largely ignored important and significant environmental impacts. The final burden of approval falls to the Department of Environmental Conservation and Governor Cuomo with this 401 water quality certification process. And we not only feel that there is ample legal ground to deny these permits, but in turn, there will be grave consequences if the state allows the Constitution pipeline to move forward. Speaking today, we have Anne Marie Gardy, environmental attorney and founding member of Stop the Pipeline, Ann Stack and Colleen McKinney, landowners who will be impacted by the pipeline, Keith Shue, technical consultant for Otsego 2000, and Wes Gillingham, program director for Mountain Keeper. So I give you Anne Marie Gardy.
So thank you everybody for coming, and everybody thinks it's because the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission approved this project conditionally over 9 months ago, that the project will proceed. Is this coming through now? No. Okay, I'll just project. But in fact, New York State has the power and the authority to deny a 401 water quality certificate. Under the Federal Clean Water Act, it is in fact the DEC who is supposed to certify that New York State water quality standards would not be violated before FERC grants its certificate. So FERC jumped the gun. They jumped the gun by almost a year. In fact, by probably almost 2 years, because even still, the environmental review is not over, and the environmental impact statement was released many, many, many months ago, over a year and a half ago. So if the laws had been followed as they were supposed to be under the Clean Water Act, private land would not have been taken by eminent domain unless DEC approved the project by granting the 401 water quality certificate. That did not happen here. So landowners faced the burden of eminent domain before approval of the project. Pipeline companies like to tell people that FERC's decision is the only one that matters. But the courts have already decided that that's not true. Over 10 years ago, Connecticut denied a 401 water quality certificate for a pipeline called Islander East that would cross the Long Island Sound, and they did it because it would impact shellfish. The pipeline company brought it to the court, and the Second Circuit Court of Appeals deferred to the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection and allowed the state to deny a project that FERC had approved.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. This is in the Second Circuit, the same circuit that would be hearing any case that involved this pipeline in New York State. So that is binding precedent here, involving a pipeline company under the Natural Gas Act. A few years ago, the DEC itself denied a 401 water quality certificate for Indian Point. So DEC knows it has the power of the state, that the state's power overrides and preempts the federal government under the Clean Water Act. It is an extremely unusual situation in federal law, and this state should seize that power and use it. The reason why DEC denied it was because of the impact to the fish and other aquatic life in the Hudson River. New York State's water quality standards protect both surface water and groundwater. It protects the water that we drink, and it protects the water that is required for aquatic animals. That is why we have brought all of these symbolic animals with us here today. These are all aquatic species of concern in New York State. And the pipeline company has not studied any one of them. And so far, the DEC has not forced them to study any New York State species of concern. DEC is the official body that actually owns all of the wildlife in New York State, and its mission is to protect all of these creatures. The company is proposing to clear cut all of the trees and vegetation surrounding the streams and wetlands and trench through all of the streams and wetlands. This would destroy all of these creatures' habitat. So how can DEC certify that it wouldn't impact them if they haven't even studied what lives there? They can't. The DEC has to make this company do a lot more work if it wants to approve the project. If it wants to deny the project right now, it has the grounds to do so. Unfortunately, the pipeline company tries to tell the DEC that all of these extra studies would take too long and cost too much, and they have to get going so they can have it operational next year. But that's not the DEC's role. The DEC is not supposed to help the applicant move its project forward as quickly as possible. The DEC's role is to protect the environment, and we want them to do what they're supposed to do. If the project does not comply with New York State law, they simply deny it. If the company is unwilling to do whatever is necessary to make it comply with New York State law, they simply deny it. And we say there is no way for this company to comply with New York State water quality standards over the route that it has chosen. You can't build a pipeline up and down mountains, clear-cutting 1,000 acres of forest land, destroying forested wetlands that protects all of the water downstream of this, and comply with New York State laws. They chose the wrong route. They chose the wrong place. They were told early in this process, 3 years ago, they were already told that this was the wrong place to put it, and they bullheadedly moved forward. This is their fault for not listening to what we tried to tell them, what the DEC tried to tell them, what U.S. Fish and Wildlife tried to tell them, what EPA tried to tell them, and what thousands of citizens in New York State tried to tell them. If this is denied, it is their fault, and that is what should happen. It should be denied.
Hi, my name is Ann Stack, and with my husband Bob, we are landowners in Delaware County, New York, directly impacted by the proposed Constitution pipeline. 11 years ago, we purchased our beautiful land with the intention of eventually building a cottage on it and retiring there. And then in April of 2012, it looked like our dream was about to begin. We were living in Reno, Nevada. We put all of our personal household belongings on a moving truck, shipped it east, and we're just wrapping up our lives there, when we got a letter in the mail from something called the Constitution Pipeline requesting permission to survey our land for a 30-inch wide high-pressure natural gas pipeline. And when we got this letter, in the midst of our excitement about moving, we were just incredulous, and we basically ignored it. We were excited with moving on. But a few weeks later, we got a phone call from one of their representatives, and that's when, for us, the nightmare really began. We explained to them that this route that they were proposing went right through our building site, and they very glibly said that's not a problem. They'd be happy to move the pipeline just a few feet away from the proposed building site. So that was 3 years ago in April. We've been fighting them and resisting them ever since. But then back in December 2014, FERC, the federal agency, rubber-stamped approval for the pipeline to take our land. And they did it through, in my opinion, a blatant misuse of eminent domain. You know, a complete violation of the intent of eminent domain to be for the good of the people. Instead, it's only for the corporate profit, as we see it in the gas industry.
Here.
Our land has a pond, it has streams, it has wetlands. And so, on a personal level, we are relying on the New York DEC to do the right thing and deny the 401 water quality certificate. We were overwhelmed by the nightmarish prospect of the pipeline coursing through our building site. And so we decided to make a statement announcing to the world the devastation that may soon occur if this piece of paradise is destroyed along with the entire route. I mean, ours is just a little parcel and everything is nightmarish. So what we've done, and I have a picture of it here, is on a 20-foot flagpole, we erected the American flag. It's right adjacent to our pond, which is right alongside of our building site / the proposed pipeline route. But we erected it in an upside-down position. This is the international sign of distress. And we just want to announce to everyone, whether you're just passing by on our dirt road, which is in the process of being widened and paved, oh, by the way, hasn't been in eons, and suddenly the town is busy preparing for something. And so the sign on the bottom that is very prominent from the road says, what does it say? I have it here. It says, upside down flag equals sign of distress. Gas corporations taking our land for their profit and greed. We implore the DEC, do not let them destroy the water quality of our ponds, streams, and wetlands, and all the diverse species, such as are represented here, that will be devastated by this nightmare. Deny the 401 water quality certification. Thank you.
My name is Colleen McKinney. My home in Delaware County is next to land that was unjustly seized through eminent domain for the proposed Constitution pipeline. Landowners like Ann Stack and my neighbor Tim Kamen and his wife Chris Kamen, people who've paid taxes in this area for decades, who've planted trees, tended gardens, built or renovated homes. These people assumed that the land they bought belonged to them. Now their land is being taken, not for the public good, not for the benefit of America, but to increase the profits of rich private gas corporations and their shareholders. The Constitution pipeline would transport shale gas through northern Pennsylvania, 124 miles northeast to Wright, New York. There it would interconnect with the Iroquois and Tennessee gas pipelines. The Constitution Pipeline Company claims that its gas would go to New York City and Boston, but the Iroquois and Tennessee pipelines are already filled to capacity. They can't transport any additional gas. So where would the gas in the Constitution pipeline go? The CEO of Cabot Oil and Gas, the drilling corporation that would ship most of the gas in the proposed pipeline, told investors last month that the proposed pipeline would, quote, move gas north into Canada, close quote. How would they do this? I have a little visual here. This is on the Iroquois website, a PDF that you can see for yourself. This is the Iroquois line that used to run north to south. They will reverse it. This is the proposed Constitution pipeline leading into the Iroquois, which would be reversed, going into Canada, New York, Canada. With its south to north or SONO project, the Iroquois pipeline plans to reverse its flow, taking American gas to Canada. From there, it can be exported overseas. But here's what's really outrageous. At the same time that the Constitution Pipeline Company was claiming it would supply urgently needed cheap gas to Boston and New York, it had already signed on to the Iroquois SONO project so that it could export its gas to Canada. This gas is not for us. These companies want to export it because natural gas prices in the rest of the world are much higher than they are here. Profit is their only concern. However, this country was not founded on seizing the property of hardworking Americans so that big, wealthy corporations can get richer by exporting American gas. We are here to ask Governor Cuomo and Acting DEC Commissioner Gerstman to protect New Yorkers' rights. The New York State DEC has the power to stop this offensive, un-American, and unconstitutional project by denying it a 401 water quality certificate, and we ask the DEC to do that.
Hello, everybody. My name is Keith Hsu. I'm an engineer and a technical advisor for Otsego 2000. We've looked at the impacts of this project from a technical standpoint very carefully. As others have already pointed out, DEC has the authority to stop this pipeline, and that is exactly what this agency must do. This is not only a bad project that, if built, will shackle us to fossil fuels for decades to come and strip people of their property rights. Constitution also wants to build this pipeline in the worst possible way, in the worst possible location, and using the worst construction techniques. You've already heard that this one would blast and trench through pristine forests, fields, wetlands, and streams of the southern tier and northern Catskills. But don't just take our word for it that it is a bad idea. What I have here is correspondences dating back to 2012, where DEC has told the applicant and has told the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that digging and blasting through wetlands and waterways of New York State is not okay, that doing so will not protect water quality. In fact, for stream crossings, DEC wrote unequivocally in a letter to FERC dated May 28, 2013. New York State DEC does not support the use of open trenching, regardless of method, as an installation technique. So, guess how many waterways Constitution wants to trench through instead of drilling underneath them? Over 250, almost every single one. In fact, it could become every single one because Constitution's contingency plan allows for that. One of the things we know about this region is that it's prone to flooding, and that makes for a very dynamically changing environment. When these mountain streams fill with fast-moving water, their banks erode, and those stream beds can shift. They can shift laterally from one's way or the other. Combine that with a pipeline buried just below the surface, this is what happens. Look at the picture. Mm-hmm. Pipelines become exposed, scouring occurs, and that leads to leaks and ruptures. In fact, DEC even describes this very type of situation in its scoping comments to FERC. But it's not just DEC's concerns that are being ignored here. Here is an advisory from the Federal Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration titled Pipeline Safety, Potential for Damage to Pipeline Facilities Caused by Flooding, River Scour, and River Channel Migration. It basically says the same thing, which is don't build a pipeline this way. Another thing, when you look at Constitution's proposed construction methods, it's shocking that they are being designed to withstand only a 5-year storm flow. A 5-year storm event. What is that? Governor Cuomo has even said that we are experiencing 100-year storm events every couple of years now. And the Catskill Mountain region in particular has been experiencing significantly wetter and more severe weather patterns over the last several decades. That's a documented fact. If a 100-year storm event is happening every couple years, then a 5-year storm flow, well, that's happening all the time. Imagine what another Hurricane Irene would do. Okay? Now Constitution will say, well, okay, it's just not feasible for us to drill through all the solid rock and underneath these waterways and wetlands. But let's make something very perfectly clear here. DEC did not pick this route. In fact, they advised against this route. Constitution chose this route ripping through the most beautiful, geologically challenging, hydrologically challenging, and ecologically sensitive parts of upstate New York. DEC is under no obligation to guarantee Constitution a feasible project. DEC's obligation is to protect water quality and the natural resources of New York State.
Right.
And that is what we are saying that DEC must do. The only correct response here is for New York State, for Governor Cuomo and the DEC to reject the water quality certificate.
Yay.
Hi, I'm Wes Gillingham. I'm the program director at Catskill Mountain Keeper.
Yeah.
And there you have it. FERC, this conference started out with a lawyer showing that FERC has violated the Clean Water Act. They issued this in advance. They issued an order approving this in advance of the 401 permit. FERC is allowing Cabot and Williams, Cabot of which is responsible for 400 violations in Pennsylvania. That's 10% of the violations that exist in the state of Pennsylvania since 2010. This whole process is flawed. FERC exists to convey public convenience for things that the community needs. This is not for this community. This is not for the people who are having their property taken. This is not for the people of New York State. This is for industry to make profit by shipping their gas overseas. FERC has refused to include cumulative impacts in their process. They've refused to look at what this pipeline is part of. What this pipeline is part of is an invasion of infrastructure and pipelines that New York State are experiencing. It's not just the Constitution pipeline. It's the AIM pipeline. It's the Dominion project. It's the Northeast Energy Direct. This is an invasion by industry into our communities and across our state for their profit with disregard, as has been shown, to the legal structure that's there to protect us.
Yes.
The DEC has the right, the moral obligation, the legal obligation, and they have the ability to deny this pipeline. FERC does this rubber stamping process. The build out of all these impacts aren't just in New York. All these pipelines that are built across our state will increase the development of fracking in Pennsylvania. All the folks that have come up and have helped us protect our health in New York State, like Craig and others, have come up here and told what's been going on in their backyard. And we have a responsibility as a state to return that favor and say, no, we don't want the impacts of these pipelines on our property, and no, we do not want the impacts on their property and our country. This is a federal issue, a national issue, and FERC is letting this go through without any cumulative impact review, and there's no reason that the DEC cannot look at the science, look at the regulatory process, and come to the conclusion that everybody in this room believes in, that they should deny it.
Yes.
So the NED project, insult to injury, NED is right on top. The Northeast Energy Direct project is right on top of the Constitution pipeline, running either parallel or right next to it throughout some of the same property owners or the neighbors of the property owners, creating this whole eminent domain and another 4 years of nightmares for people before the decisions get made. What's happening with the NED project? The people in New Hampshire, the people in Massachusetts, the people across New York are saying, no, this is not public need. We do not need this. And the DEC should uphold all of that and use the power and authority that they have and deny the project.
Yes.
Thank you.
We don't want this pipeline.
Right. So, can I ask members of the press if there are questions?
I guess I would say, just first of all, for the viewers at home, explain the water quality certification and how this would stop the pipeline, essentially.
Sure. Cameron, do you want
Yeah. So New York State has a lot of they're quite complex state water quality standards. They're state law, and they're called water quality standards, and they protect all waters and they trigger the species laws under Article 15. So so all the streams and all the bodies of water are classified. So many of the streams that would be crossed by this pipeline are classified CT for it's trout spawning. What is it? No, that's
Cold water.
cold water trout
and trout spawning.
Right. And so every body of water has classifications and classified uses, and so as I said, many of them are specially protected because they're trout spawning streams. So what the DEC said to FERC when it was issuing comments was that these streams and wetlands should not be crossed by trenching. They should be borne under, because it's the vegetation that holds the streams together. It's the vegetation that maintains the habitat for the species that live within these aquatic areas. And the DEC also protects the groundwater, all of the groundwater, not just the groundwater within 150 feet of the proposed pipeline, but all of the groundwater. So they're just making them test for existing wells within 150 feet. But all the groundwater should be tested, because somebody could build a well there in the future, and that would be impacted as well. So it's really quite a complex series of laws that are interconnected with other laws. And they're very stringent, which is why we have such pure water in New York State.
Thank you for explaining that. I know it's complex. If this certificate is denied, does that stop the pipeline outright, or will it just delay the process?
No, it stops it all right. Because the DEC is acting under federal authority. So, lots of people like to say, oh, it's state law, but actually it's federal law, because it is been brought into the federal level by the Clean Water Act. And so it is a unique situation where the state preempts the federal government.
Anne-Marie, if the state does approve this, what is your response going to be, and how quickly?
Well, we have to read what they say. I mean, we can't say now, on what grounds we could bring suits, but certainly at this point there are a lot of procedural violations that we're aware of, but substantively we don't know until they actually would issue such a thing. And it would go to the Second Circuit. That's by law.
Well, and I would just add to that, you've listened to what the issues are on the regulatory level and the scientific level in terms of the impacts.
Step to the mic, please.
If the DEC does not look at those in complete scrutiny, and they allow this to go forward, what we're witnessing is the DEC getting pushed around by a federal agency, and that's a precedent that we really can't have, not just in this state, but in this country.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that. I have personally, with the PACE, I'm a volunteer at the PACE Environmental Litigation Clinic, and we have, for the past 3 years, been submitting FOIA and FOIL requests, Freedom of Information requests, to all of the agencies involved. And I will tell you that when you read the correspondence between all of these agencies and the industry, it makes it appear like the DEC is a member of the team.
Well, I'd like to read that. Will you give me that correspondence? I'd very
Well,
much
some
like
of
to
it
read
is
that.
on Stop the Pipeline's websites for Fish and Wildlife for this. We have been holding off on the DEC because we're basically asking the DEC, since it's our official body, to do the right thing. We're not here to attack the DEC, because we're here to tell the DEC that we expect them to do the right thing here today.
That's
And-
right.
and, but the oil and gas companies have this attitude that they want what they want. For example, they wanted the application deemed complete last fall. And so when they asked the DEC about it, the DEC said, well, it's not complete until we have surveyed all of the land. And what the gas pipeline did was it went to Cuomo. And so that's what they did. They went to Cuomo. And so then on Christmas Eve, DEC issued a notice of complete application, even though they still don't have a complete application. They still don't have all of the survey information from all of these properties. We still don't have a complete environmental impact statement from all of the properties and all of the impacts on all of these things. This is a very, very bad situation.
Is there a possibility of getting contamination into the Susquehanna and then down into the Delaware from any screw-ups that might occur in the
Yeah, of course
construction
there are.
of
First of
the-
all, I mean, let's just deal with the storm issue. Let's just say that we have they're planning on clear cutting, 1,800 acres of land. 1,000 of it is forested, and a lot of it is on steep slopes, and a lot of it is with shallow bedrock. So the only thing that holds this soil together are the trees and vegetation. And so if that vegetation is cleared as they want it to be, and we have a big storm, then all of that water runs through and will wash out everything. Anybody who has lived through these storms knows what happens when the trees are standing. And so if you cut everything that holds the soil in place around these streams and wetlands, then that's all doing that. And the other thing about that is everybody that holds this land that would be taken for this pipeline, they are providing ecological services for the state and the states below us through maintenance of trees and forest land on their land, and it costs the state nothing because these people are paying taxes to let nature do its job.
Yeah, one last question? More questions? Yes.
Can you talk about the eminent domain aspect of this whole situation and how eminent domain is being used in this particular case?
I have to do this too? Okay. So how it is that the Natural Gas Act grants the federal government the right of eminent domain for interstate pipelines. The Natural Gas Act was passed in 1938. And so if the federal government says that the pipeline is in public convenience and necessity, and they don't negotiate a deal, then they have the right to bring it before eminent domain. But what's going on right now is a very unusual, and that's what happened. So on December 2nd, FERC issued a certificate, a conditional certificate, and by Christmas, 125 complaints and condemnation had been filed with the Northern District of New York against Ann's property, against Tim Kamen's property, against Mary Tuttle's property, against lots of people's property, 125 property owners. This was before all of these other necessary certificates and permits had been obtained. So we think it was entirely wrong. But the point is that to show public convenience and necessity, you should be forced to show that it is going to be used in this country. And that is what was missing from this project. In the environmental review and in the entire application, there is not one study, one market study, that shows that this gas would be used in New York State or in New England. The only use that they mentioned was with a little startup called Leather Stocking, and their lawyer said that even if they did everything, all 20 franchises for which they don't even have official binding agreements, it would be 0.6% of the 650,000 decatherms per day. And, like not even a pimple on this pipeline. That does not justify need for all of this destruction and for the taking of property. FERC is supposed to be engaged in a balancing act between need and impacts, but that's not what it does. Because FERC, as people have been pointing out recently, is a commission that works on commission. It gets its money by approving pipelines, and it gets a percentage of the revenue that flows through those pipelines.
All right, well, thank you very much.